Sometimes, love doesn't vanish in the storm. It disappears quietly, in glances that linger too long, in words left unspoken, and in the faint outline of a stranger standing just beyond the window. That's where Jack's story begins, on a quiet morning that would change everything he thought he knew about love, trust, and the woman who once promised him forever. The days at the farm rolled by like soft waves, steady, peaceful, familiar. The scent of fresh hay mingled with the sound of wind moving through the rice fields. For a while, life felt gentle again. After everything they'd been through, Jack and Tien had finally found a rhythm, working side by side, eating dinner with Jack's mother, laughing by the firelight at night. It wasn't perfect, but it was home. Yet, as the days grew warmer, something began to shift. It started small. Tien would leave the table early, saying she needed to check on the animals. She spent longer hours walking by herself along the path that led toward the hills. Sometimes she would come back with her dress damp from the river, her eyes lost in thought. Jack noticed. He always noticed. He tried to tell himself it was nothing, that maybe she just needed space. But love, when it's deep, senses the quiet tremors before the earthquake. And Jack could feel it. That subtle distance that begins when two hearts start to drift apart. One evening, as the golden light of sunset poured through the kitchen window, he saw her standing by the sink, staring out into the fields. Her expression was far away. Not sad, but burdened. "What are you thinking about?" Jack asked softly. Tien turned, startled. "Oh, nothing," she replied quickly. "Just the weather." But her voice carried that tiny tremble, the kind that only truth can still. Jack smiled faintly, trying to ease the air. "You've been quiet lately." "I've just been tired," she said, her eyes darting away. He reached for her hand. "If something's bothering you, I hope you'll tell me." She hesitated for a second, then gave a small nod and whispered, "I will." But that night, long after the lights went out, Jack could still hear her breathing, uneven, restless, as though her dreams were troubled by something she couldn't share. It was late afternoon when Jack first saw him. He was mending the fence near the east field when he noticed a figure standing by the old willow tree, tall, motionless, his dark coat blending into the shadow of the branches. The man stood there for a long moment, watching the farmhouse, before slowly walking toward the dirt road that led to the woods. Something about him didn't feel right. When Jack returned to the house, he found Tien out of breath, as though she'd been running. Her cheeks were flushed, her hair slightly disheveled. "Where have you been?" Jack asked. She froze, then smiled faintly. "I went to pick herbs for your mother." Jack's mother, Mrs. Loy, looked up from her knitting nearby. "Herbs? But dear, we still have plenty from last week." Tien didn't answer. She just nodded politely and went upstairs, leaving behind a silence heavy enough to notice. That evening, as they sat at the dinner table, the air between them felt heavier than ever. Jack's mother tried to lighten the mood with stories of old friends, but Tien barely spoke a word. She kept glancing toward the window, her eyes darting to the dark outline of the fields outside. Jack followed her gaze, but saw only darkness. Later, when everyone had gone to bed, he stood by that same window. The moon hung low, casting a silver shimmer across the rice fields. And there, near the willow, was a flicker of movement. Someone was there, watching. Jack's pulse quickened. He stepped outside quietly, his feet crunching softly against the gravel. But when he reached the edge of the yard, the shadow was gone. Only the rustle of leaves remained. He stayed there for a long moment, his breath visible in the cool night air. Something inside him whispered that life at the farm, the peace they had built, was beginning to unravel. In the following days, Jack noticed more strange things. A small tear in Tien's dress, one she didn't remember making. Mud on her shoes even though it hadn't rained. Once, he found her near the barn, holding a small envelope. When she saw him, she quickly hid it behind her back. "Mail?" he asked casually. "Just something for the neighbors," she replied too quickly. He nodded, but his chest tightened. The woman he loved was slipping away, not in body, but in spirit. And he didn't know how to stop it. That night, Mrs. Loy found Jack sitting alone on the porch. "You look worried," she said softly. He sighed. "I think Tien is hiding something from me." Mrs. Loy's face softened. "Sometimes, child, people keep secrets not to hurt us, but to protect us. Have you asked her gently?" Jack nodded. "She won't tell me." His mother looked toward the dark fields. then all you can do is stand beside her, even in silence. If it's love, truth finds its way home. Jack wanted to believe that. But love, he thought, could also drown in silence. It was a foggy morning when Jack decided to follow her. Tien left the house before sunrise, her shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. She moved quickly through the mist, down the narrow path leading away from the farm. Jack kept his distance, his steps careful, his heart pounding. The trail led toward the old chapel at the edge of the forest, a place long abandoned since the floods. Tien stopped near the crumbling gate. And there he was, the stranger. Jack froze behind the trees, his breath catching in his throat. Tien was speaking to the man in a low, urgent tone. Her hand trembled as she handed him something, a small envelope. He took it, nodded once, and turned away, vanishing into the fog. Tien stood there for a moment longer, her eyes wet with tears. Then she turned and slowly began to walk back. Jack felt his chest tighten with a pain he hadn't known before. Not anger, but heartbreak mixed with confusion. When she came home later, he tried to act normal, but the words burned inside him until he couldn't hold them back anymore. Who was he, Tien? Her eyes widened. Who? The man at the old chapel. She froze. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she whispered, "Jack, please don't ask me about him." "I have to," Jack said, "because if I don't, this silence will destroy us." Tien turned away, her voice breaking. "You wouldn't understand." "Then make me understand." Her shoulders trembled. "I can't. Not yet." She walked to the bedroom, closing the door behind her. The sound echoed like a soft heartbreak in the quiet house. That night, Jack couldn't sleep. The rain had stopped, but the wind howled softly through the cracks of the old house. He sat by the window, staring out at the field. Then, through the pale glow of moonlight, he saw movement again. A figure by the willow tree. The same man. And this time, Tien was there too. She was wearing her pale blue shawl, the one she always wore when she was afraid. The man said something to her. She hesitated, then nodded. They began walking together down the narrow path toward the woods. Jack pressed his hand against the glass, his breath fogging the window. He wanted to call out, to stop her, to demand the truth, but the sound caught in his throat. Instead, he just watched as her figure grew smaller, her outline fading into the mist. The love of his life was walking away with a stranger, and all he could do was stand there, powerless. When dawn came, the house was silent. 2 days passed, no word, no message. Jack searched the nearby towns, the train station, the markets. No one had seen her. When he returned home, exhausted and hollow, his mother handed him something, a folded piece of paper found by the porch. It was a letter. Tien's handwriting flowed gently across the page, trembling but clear. "Jack, by the time you read this, I will be gone. Please know that leaving wasn't easy for me. I wanted to tell you everything, but I couldn't. The man you saw was from my past, a part of my life I thought had ended long ago. He came to warn me, to ask for help with something I couldn't refuse. If I stayed silent, it was only to protect you and your mother. I don't know how long I'll be gone, maybe forever. But please remember, every quiet morning we shared, every smile, every laugh, they were real. You gave me peace when I thought I would never have it again. Tien." Jack's hands trembled as he finished reading. The paper slipped slightly, brushing against his knee. He sat there for a long while, the wind carrying the faint sound of the bamboo chimes outside. His mother stood nearby, tears glistening in her eyes. She didn't speak. She simply placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, the kind of touch that says more than words ever could. That night, Jack lit a lantern and placed it on the porch. The warm glow flickered softly, its light stretching out into the darkness, as if guiding her way home. Time passed slowly. The seasons changed, but the ache remained. Every morning, Jack still made 2 cups of coffee, one for himself, one for her. Sometimes he'd sit by the window and imagine her walking up the path again, her laughter carried on the wind. Mrs. Loy watched her son quietly. She'd seen that kind of pain before. The kind that doesn't scream but lingers like a shadow behind the eyes. One evening, as they sat by the fire, she spoke softly. "You can't live holding on to what's gone, Jack." He nodded slowly. "I just wish I knew why she didn't trust me enough to tell me." His mother smiled sadly. "Trust isn't always about love. Sometimes it's about fear. Fear of losing the very thing we're trying to protect." Jack looked into the firelight, thinking of Tien's trembling hands, her tearful eyes that last night by the willow tree. He realized she hadn't left out of betrayal, but out of something far more human: guilt, duty, maybe even sacrifice. Months later, on a quiet spring morning, Jack walked out to the fields. The rice plants swayed gently under the soft wind, and the air smelled of new beginnings. He stopped by the old willow tree, the same place where he had last seen her. There, on one of the lower branches, hung a small wooden pendant tied with red string. It was old, carved with the initials J and T, the one they'd made together years ago. Jack's heart tightened. He took it gently in his hands, feeling the warmth of memory rush back like sunlight breaking through the clouds. She had been there, recently. He looked toward the horizon, and for the first time in months, he smiled. Not because the pain was gone, but because he finally understood. Some loves don't vanish. They simply change form, carried by time, by wind, by memory. That night, Jack sat on the porch with his mother. The stars shimmered softly above, and the air was still. "You found peace, haven't you?" Mrs. Loy asked quietly. Jack nodded. "I think so. She'll always be part of this place, part of me." Mrs. Loy smiled faintly. "Then she's never truly gone." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the sound of the night: crickets, wind, the gentle creak of the old swing. Jack closed his eyes, hearing her voice in his memory. Soft, warm, alive. "If the wind ever brings my name back to you, I hope it carries a prayer of gratitude." And as the night deepened, the wind did rise, softly, like a whisper. It brushed through the fields, through the open windows, through the heart of a man who once stood in the shadow beyond the window, and finally found his way back to the light. Thank you for listening to today's story. In the quiet spaces of our lives, love often leaves not through anger, but through silence. Yet even in that silence, it lingers, shaping who we are, reminding us that every ending carries the echo of a beginning. Until next time, take care, stay kind, and may your heart always find peace, even in the shadows beyond the window.